One of the most wonderful things about Heritage for the Future is the sheer amount of grime that can be found in the bottom half of the roster. Obviously, the top tiers have access to tons of broken stuff, but this game's almost non existent balancing means that even some of the game's mid and low tiers have tons of stupid shit as well. It may not make them any more viable, but it sure as hell makes them more interesting. Still, you have to wonder just where the line is drawn in such a wacky game. How much grime can a character have and still end up being outclassed by over half the roster? What kind of issues would a character with solid zoning, excellent Okizeme, good anti-airs, and one of the absolute best supers in the game have to possess to be considered bottom 6? That's the question I'll be answering as we look at Hol Horse. Hol Horse, the humble cowboy come to unleash the power of his stand, the Emperor, into Heritage. You might be surprised to learn that Hol was actually added in the Heritage for the Future update to the original JoJo's Venture game, which is really strange to me. He was well liked by the author of the manga, Hirohiko Araki, hence the multiple appearances that he made and the fact that he was meant to join the main cast of the part, so it seems strange that when a fighting game based on Stardust Crusaders was created, he was passed over. There do exist unfinished Hol Horse sprites in the data for JoJo's Venture though, which seem to suggest he was at least planned for inclusion in that game. When the Heritage for the Future update was released, Hol Horse was added as a passive stand character who teams up with Jay Guile and uses his trusty gun to become an extremely annoying fighter who can be dangerous in the right circumstance. Hol is all about cheap tactics and never fighting alone. Since he was a massive pussy in the manga, it makes sense that this would translate to him being a zoner in the game, but he possesses a very interesting kit with some seriously scary tools. Even though he's usually considered a zoner and has moves that can complement such a playstyle, his biggest strengths come from his incredible Oki and high damage cash outs. Starting off simple, Hol Horse's normals are nothing to write home about, but there's some solid stuff to be found here. It's nothing amazing, but it does mean he's not entirely screwed if the opponent makes it in. His 5A and 2A are both extremely solid. 3-frame startup on 5A and 4-frame startup on 2A means they are your go-to options at close range, very reliable for Abare and pressure. Both buttons also combo into each other, letting him cash out damage that's low, but hey, you take what you can get. 2A also dissipates any projectiles it comes in contact with, which is a nice little bonus. 2C is a slide that travels fairly far and hits low. This is an important normal, but it's not to be spammed. It offers two very important things that are integral to Hol's game plan. It hits low and it knocks down. When this move hits, Hol is a happy fella, for reasons I'll get into soon, but be wary. Sliding normals in fighting games usually share one consistent weakness. They are hella unsafe on block. Hol's is no different, and it can't be special cancelled either. Should the opponent block it or even avoid it altogether, you'll likely be eating a big punish. However, Hol also has two versions of the move that can be done out of a dash. 4-4-2C and 6-6-2C will alter the slide to travel a shorter or farther distance respectively. These versions of the move take longer to start up, but compensate by means of being special cancelable. Either way, these moves end up being some of the most threatening in his kit under the right conditions, so keep them in the back of your thoughts. Hol's 5C is a very silly normal with the ability to wall bounce. The wall bounce makes 5C essential to netting big damage with Hol, and it has excellent synergy with some of his special moves. It also has decent range since he moves forward, and Hol can use it in block strings to frame trap the opponent, which is a big point for Hol, as it lets him potentially score the wall bounce and cash out on big damage. Hol's buttons as a whole tend to be kind of situational, and he has some that are just flat out bad, particularly in regards to his dashing normals. Most of them are just inferior versions of his standing normals, with some having worse properties. Dash C, as an example, does not knock down, which means it loses all the damage potential that standing 5C has, on top of just having longer startup. Hol's command normals are actually pretty solid. 4A is a puff of cigarette smoke and 4B is a jumping kick. They both serve a similar purpose, which is to anti-air. 4A is generally more preferable since it has a higher hitbox and can lead into combos, but both are solid overall. 4C is a fairly fast low, which is important for Izoki, and it's also good in block strings. In the air, Hol's 5C provides an excellent jump in with a long hitbox and fast startup. Hol isn't a character that needs to be in the air often, but if you do decide to jump, this move is his rock. As Hol is a passive stand character, pressing the S button will activate a unique attack for him, the Emperor Bullet. This is a seriously cool move and indicative of Capcom's ability to adapt the original manga's many powers and abilities into neat mechanics. The bullet will linger on screen for a few seconds, during which you can input different directions to influence where the bullet flies. You can program it in just about any direction you please, allowing it to cover areas of the screen that Hol wouldn't be able to reach. Hol can influence the angle of the bullet fired in some of his other specials, but this one gives you total freedom over the bullet. While it seems like it'd be an epic tool for space control and zoning, the slow startup compounded by the amount of time the bullet takes to begin traveling kinda kills that potential. It has its uses in certain Oki setups that lead to knockdowns, so it's not completely worthless, but again, kinda situational. Also, depending on what emulator you're playing on, you can freeze the game by performing certain inputs while using the move. Pretty funny. Hol's specials are what define his game plan though. Against certain characters, he can be a menace that strikes fear into even the most hardened players, and they're integral to succeeding with him. But before we talk about that, there's two properties Hol possesses that help his space controlling and zoning quite a lot. The first is an extremely fast roll, and the other is the unique ability to run. Most characters have dashes and back dashes, but tapping forward or back twice for Hol will have him straight up book it. The fast speed and general control it gives him over his maneuverability is something that's extremely appreciated from a character who usually wants to be far away from his opponent. Hol's primary tool for keep away is 236X, a straight projectile with snappy startup and fast travel speed. You can angle the bullet up or down to catch crouchers or jumpers, and it can combine with his other specials to create a wall that can be hard to cross for lots of players and characters. 236H travels extremely low and actually hits as a low 2, which is hilarious, but also very strong for catching people walking back. So this move covers horizontal space, but in order to control the space above and below him and his opponent, Hol calls upon 214X and 623X. 214X will have Hanged Man pop in from the floor. Where he appears from depends on the button pressed, so similar to JP spikes in SF6, make sure to learn the proper positioning because this can be punished on whiff. You'll usually know which versions to do at the right range just by playing, but do be wary if you're starting off and don't have the positions down. On hit, the opponent is left trapped and vulnerable to an easy 5C wall bounce, and even if the opponent blocks it, you're left in block stun for an extremely long time. It's an excellent block string ender because it allows Hol to either retreat or combo, putting him in an advantageous situation regardless of if it hits or not. The sheer damage potential with meter is what makes Hol a serious contender, but we'll get to that shortly. The glass shots are an extremely annoying move with a dangerous property. Hol fires a bullet towards the air, and if it makes contact with the ceiling, even in stages that take place outdoors, shards of glass will fall down. This move's pretty nasty. As an anti-air, it's fast and you can do 4A into it for solid damage and positioning, but the real danger is in the glass that falls down after the bullet hits the ceiling. These glass shard pieces hit as overheads, and Hol can act while they're falling, as well as being able to perform them when the opponent is knocked down. Keep this in mind because it'll be extremely important later on. Hol has 3 supers and they make his meter spending quite flexible. The flurry of bullets, 236AA, is a wall of projectiles with solid damage output. On top of being one of the only things Hol can do out of a jump that isn't just a normal, it has a crouching variation which causes the bullets to hit as lows. All of them. That's pretty funny. But also it's a solid reversal thanks to how low to the ground Hol crouches, and it's a solid punish for tandems. Just be wary that it can be punished on whiff due to the high recovery. Hanged Man super causes Hol to fire 3 shots at the screen. If any of them connect, you're rewarded with a creepy cinematic that deals good damage. The 3 shots have really good range, so it's a solid punish option, but keep in mind that they do take a long time to travel. The super also causes wall bounce, which is really nice for Hol. Both of these are good uses of meter. It's hard to say no to such solid damage, but fundamentally they are outclassed by Hol's best super and perhaps his strongest tool, the slow bullet. 421AA will cause Hol to fire out a bullet that slows down the game tremendously. There's so many uses to this bad boy, I don't even know where to start. The damage? It's excellent. Besides high raw damage, you can also combo this super into itself. Slow bullet can be a seriously scary callout in neutral. Like his S-Emperor bullets, this can be controlled manually by the player, and due to the way it slows the game down, it's harder than it looks to avoid this. Sure, you can roll it, but it messes with your inputs heavily due to the slowdown. Mistimed rolls are always a threat when this baby is out. Now, the most devastating property of this move is something I'd rather demonstrate than discuss, so please remain seated. Keep in mind that in the clip you're about to witness, Abdul is holding down back and thus is blocking low. Yeah. Oh, it must just hit as an overhead, right? That's a bit strange, isn't it? Oh. Hol Horse slow bullet is unblockable. It's time to talk about Hol's Oki, the one thing keeping this guy hanging. For as decent as his zoning is and how irritating his 5C frame traps would be, it all gets tied together the moment this fucker scores a knockdown. I hyped up 5C's wall bounce potential and the glass shots being overheads, and for good reason. Let's tackle the latter first. Since glass shots is an overhead, it means that hitting with a low at the same time will unblockable the opponent. Hol has a variety of ways to go into unblockables, but 5C tends to be his most consistent method since the wall bounce will cause a knockdown and give him ample time to set up another glass shot, which he can then combine with his low hitting 4C and the Hanged Man special, potentially giving him looping unblockable setups. And even if they don't unblockable, he can still force some very ambiguous 50-50s. With this 5S, Hol can also use these situations to build ass loads of meter, giving him even more incentive to go for the KD. In an ideal situation, Hol can easily make your life a living hell with just one knockdown or Hanged Man hit, which isn't as hard as it sounds thanks to his frame traps. The threat of whether or not he'll call Hanged Man, do a gunshot, or do 5C when ending a block string can make situations like this pretty dangerous. In certain matchups, particularly against characters with slow wake-up timings like Old Joseph, you can really raise hell. However, this is just the beginning. These pissy, boring glass shots into 2C loops don't hold a candle to Hol's most dangerous setups, which involve the slow bullet. For some context, this is what the ideal Hol Horse round looks like. With 3 or 4 bars of meter, just one 5C can allow Hol Horse to terminate a life bar completely. The insane thing is, even without a clean 5C hit, he can still loop the slow bullet super upwards of 3 times for an easy 50 to 75% combo. This super is seriously disgusting, and it makes Hol frankly terrifying to go up against. Hol is already a frustrating character to fight due to his zoning-oriented playstyle, but the knowledge that a single stray Hanged Man can end the game completely and create inescapable checkmate situations only furthers the power of the mental stack this character creates. Again, I cannot understate the power of the slow bullet. It is the crux upon which Hol's viability revolves. So, sounds pretty broken, right? This character has to be at least top 10. Come on, you know this song and dance by now. That last section was hella idealistic. In a perfect world, every second or third round with Hol would begin with 5C and end with a victory screen and maybe an angry message in the Fightcade chat. If only it were so. Hol is weighed down by numerous issues that belie the power of the slow bullet and his Oki. His reputation in the community has never been particularly good. The earliest tier lists I've laid my eyes upon date back to 2018, and even back then he was bumming around in the bottom 10 or close to that point. When it became obvious how exploitable his weaknesses were, not to mention the optimization of other characters once thought to be lower mid-tier such as Devo, his stocks dropped even further. The meta for Heritage continues to shift, albeit in more subtle ways, with characters like Newcac and Rubber Soul slowly going up in tier lists. Characters who were once considered worse or around the same level as Hol have gone up, while the Cowboy only continues to drop. The simple fact is, Hol's explosive kit of unblockable setups and disgusting Oki falls apart fast in a lot of situations, particularly concerning active stand characters. It's been a while since I covered Heritage in a video, so let's recount some system mechanics. Active and weapon stand characters can press the S button to bring out their stand, modifying their moveset and blessing them with a boatload of benefits. Among the most important of these is immunity to knockdowns. Put 2 and 2 together and you begin to realize why this is a massive problem for Hol. He needs knockdowns for TODs, and without them, his game plan is reduced to fleeing, retreating, running away, and also anti-airing occasionally. He's obviously not the only character with godly Oki, but if you take Hol Horse and compare him to, say, Vanilla Ice, another character with pretty decent Oki, it's night and fucking day. Knockdowns in this game are super strong. Wake-ups in Heritage have a quirk that makes it so that you are unable to input any buttons for 1 frame while getting up from a knockdown. This means you cannot perform reversals against Oki that's done meaty. The simplified version is that all those crazy 50-50s and unblockables that you see players performing after a knockdown, you gotta hold that shit. Characters like Jotaro and Vice have mountains of strengths that can circumvent the fact that a stand-on opponent can't be knocked down, but Hol doesn't share that quality. Even stand crashing isn't much of a solution. Glass shots can add up to do decent damage against stand gauges, but it's extremely easy to just turtle and recover that gauge while Hol is far away. He's so weak up close that it just isn't threatening enough to scare an active stand into deactivating. Actually, getting turtled is a fairly big issue for Hol Horse in general. Against most top tiers, Hol absolutely needs the life lead since he's vastly outdamaged by all of them. If the life lead slips away from him, it's extremely easy for most active stands to use their excellent buttons and double jumps to camp him out with little effort. And this is just in a general sense, because going deeper into matchup specifics only makes the gap even easier to point out. Stand-on Kakyoins, Vice, Jotaro, Polnareff, and Abdul have some of the best buttons in the game, and there's little Hol can do to contest them. If he has to go in, it usually means there's little hope to win the game. Most of these characters are already capable of getting through Hol's zoning and delivering the nastiest backshots you've ever seen, so the fact that he loses to them at the farther screen ranges that he wants to be is not exactly a good look for the character. Hol might be able to stand a chance with his zoning by means of evening the odds with chip damage, but stand-on characters don't suffer chip damage. Womp womp. As far as the specifics, well, it's about as hopeless as you think it is. Hol Horse struggles to cut Kakyoin's nets, so have fun. You'd think Hol would be able to bully given Kak and New Kak both have among the slowest wake-up timing in the game, which would make them vulnerable to Hol's strong Oki, but active stands, so no. This matchup is heavily favored for both Kakyoins, since they both have godly stand-on normals and nets that allow them to turtle Hol, and Hol can't do much against his rushdown either. Pet Shop is arguably just as unfriendly to Hol. This is a fucking miserable matchup. In a battle of unblockables, Pet Shop wins out on practicality, both because icicles in general are busted, but also because 2C and 4C whiff against Pet Shop when he's standing. Since Hol pretty much can't ever set up his Oki in this match, and most of his specials are slow enough to give Pet Shop plenty of time to get in, this means all Hol really can do here is slow bullet and hope to land a few stray gunshots. Once Pet Shop is in or Hol runs out of meter, well then you die, I guess. Since Kak and Pet Shop are still frequently banned in most tournaments, it isn't a huge deal, but if you're playing in a tournament where the two are legalized, don't expect Hol to be able to do much. Against the legal top 3 it doesn't get much better, since Vice and Jotaro can 2-touch him with one hit, and he doesn't fare much better against Polnareff either. They all have insanely good jabs that can very easily lead to big tandem damage, so once they get in, there's not much Hol can do. They're good at turtling and stand on, and Hol can't do much against this either. Polnareff not being able to block while Shooting Star is active may have posed an issue, but you can just walk him down with your godly stand-on buttons, and Hol can't do shit against Shooting Star when Pole is in his face. He especially struggles against Vice, due to Vice's weird hurtbox making some combos much harder and his rolls being so fast. You might think, just throw the roll, but this opens up another unique problem Hol has. Hol Horse's throw is punishable on hit. Against a good portion of the roster, you can recover before Hol's animation finishes and punish him for landing a throw. If Hol Horse successfully calls out a roll with a throw, unless the throw kills, the Hol player is punished for making the right read. God, I love this game. This makes turtling even harder for Hol to contend with. I think maybe the biggest problem Hol suffers from in a vacuum is the extremely high risks he has to take. Hol is a character that capitalizes heavily on mistakes. He needs to hit 5C to get his big damage, but think about how many characters can land a jab and end up in an even more advantageous situation than Hol would be after his best starters. Hol's fastest starters, on the other hand, lead to jack shit on hit. This disparity in damage haunts Hol and makes him have to play an extremely slow game that only gives the character superior to him even more time to land a game-winning hit. So let's recap. Hol is extremely reliant on knockdowns, but he can't knock down active or weapon stand characters when they're in stand-on mode. Hol's best damage requires him to use risky moves that, if blocked or whiffed, can easily get him killed. If he can't knock down, he relies on substandard zoning and anti-airing. He can't call out rolls due to a shitty throw, and he gets shit on by the top tiers in pretty much any weapon or active stand. But if he gets that decisive 5C and has the meter to loop Slow Bullet, he kills you. Slow Bullet does so much fucking heavy lifting for this character, it's insane. This move's back is killing it from how hard it carries Hol. He'd be a pretty shit character without it, wouldn't he? And here we are. Hol Horse and Boingo, who are colloquially known by the community as Hoingo. They're one of the 6 secret characters in Heritage, and just like the other sans Khan, he's a modified version of an existing character. It's extremely funny to me that 2 versions of Hol were added in Heritage, but the funnier part is that Hoingo is even worse than regular Hol Horse. He's usually seen as bottom 2, right at the very end of most tier lists along with Mariah. Boingo takes the basics of Hol's already fairly thin kit and strips it down, leaving him figuratively naked in a game where you really don't want to be that way. Boingo is based on the moment in the manga where Hol Horse teams up with Boingo, one of Dio's assassins who has the stand Toth that can predict the future. This means that in the game, Boingo loses access to all of his moves that involved Hanged Man, and he also loses the Slow Bullet for some reason. You can probably already see where this is going, but it wouldn't be very fun to just stop there without describing his unique tools. Hoingo keeps the gunshots and glass shots as well as most normals, but unfortunately they are severely downgraded from Hol. Some normals like 2A and 5C had their startup and recovery increased, making him even worse at pressure and frame trapping, something that's only compounded by the lack of Hanged Man. Hoingo's meterless damage is miserable, but without the option to scare a mashing or jumping opponent with the threat of Hanged Man into a knockdown, you don't have much to make people respect you with this character. Like I mentioned, Hoingo does not have the Slow Bullet super. Instead, he picks up 2 new ones that don't exactly make up for it. The Pipe Super. Honestly, I'm still not even sure what to say about this one. Hoingo fires a bunch of bullets into a pipe, and after a few seconds they'll begin firing out at a certain angle, which changes based on what buttons are used to activate the super. The bullets that fire out are unblockable, and you can combo after they hit, letting you do some decent damage, the best Hoingo usually gets realistically. The problem? This super is so fucking goddamn slow. It already takes forever to begin, so you're not setting this up unless your opponent decides to go AFK and let you, or you land a knockdown with 5C. Don't even think about using this in neutral, it's not happening. The bullets being unblockable is a strong property, that much cannot be denied, but this super has a fatal flaw that kind of fucks the entire thing up. If Hoingo is hit while the pipes are up, they'll disappear. This super is hella gimmicky. The initial hit is unblockable and doesn't do any damage, so you can meme with it, but as a whole, it's just not a particularly useful super. Besides the fact that your opponent pretty much has to let it happen, the reward on hit is pretty unimpressive, especially compared to his other super. The truck is a command throw and Hoingo's primary meter dump. Besides being his best combo tool after a 5A or 2A, it also causes a knockdown and lets him set up Oki. It is punishable on whiff, so do be careful against jumps and push blocks. Trying to tick into this throw is a tricky affair because Hoingo doesn't really have any ways to threaten the opponent into staying at a range and position where he can do any type of strike throw that would make this a valuable option. But for punishes, a button into truck is always reliable. That's Hoingo's two unique supers down. Do they make up for the loss of slow bullet? Not at all. There's one more unique Hoingo property to discuss and it's his S. Hoingo's S button fires a controllable bullet just like Hol, but Hoingo's S bullet is one of the few aspects of the character that's vastly superior to regular Hol. It starts up way faster, meaning it's actually a practical, albeit risky neutral tool, one that the guy kinda needs when he can't really do anything up close. But with the ability to program the bullet's movement in different erratic ways, Hoingo appreciates this as an approaching tool and as a zoning tool. Hoingo plays similarly to Hol in many ways. Annoying glass shot high-low mix-ups, zoning, and some low damage combos up close. There are things both of them can do, but the primary difference is that Hol has the slow bullet. It gives him better rewards on knockdowns, it's infinitely scarier to contend with in neutral than anything Hoingo has, and without it, he's just kind of an annoying gnat. You can make him work, something that's been proven by the likes of Puzzle 3301, Zeta, and Goroslum. Hoingo may be swimming in 8-2s and 9-1s, but as long as you've got the mental fortitude to run and piss people off, you can have some fun with him. Speaking of, Hol Horse isn't totally hopeless either. His strengths are not to be undermined. A passive stand with damage potential as easy as Hol's isn't common to come across, and he's got his fair share of players who have demonstrated the character's potential, like SploogieMcNoodle, Mr. Business, the aforementioned Puzzle 3301, and Tex Western, who won the Heritage Tournament at CE Otaku 2022 using Hol. The Tournament of Power is a series of online tournaments run by a person named Surabu, and the most recent edition of the tournament, which featured Heritage for the Future, was won by a Hol Horse player named Autumn Falls. You'll often see newer inexperienced players expressing anger towards Hol. He's a zoner and he can kill you off of very simple mistakes, so it's easy for him to trounce a noob with little effort. However, more experienced players will know to exercise patience against Hol. Without taking advantage of big errors to cash out with slow bullet loops, he kinda just has to chip you away, which is a dangerous game when fighting an active stand or just a high tier in general. Hol needs to be played fairly deliberately. Consistent anti-airs are something every top Hol player are excellent at, and it's important for him, but so is making sure not to overextend. Hol can cash out after risking it big, but those risks can just as easily get him killed. In some way, he's kind of similar to Mariah, which is why this video was sort of hard to write. They're both zoners who struggle in the meta due to not being able to utilize their powerful Oki on active stands. Obviously there are more differences, and Hol has more practical damage and doesn't need to level up to become not terrible, but it's a fun comparison to make. I spent some time playing Hol just to get an idea of the character, and he's extremely fun, but requires fairly quick thinking and a good ability to weigh your options. His moves being punishable means it's very easy to do a bad hanged man or glass shots and get punished for it, so it's important to recognize when to use his safer tools to create space between you and your opponent, and when to go ham for those delicious TODs. Hol may be annoying as fuck to fight, but playing and watching him was a lot of fun. Anyway, that's it for now. As usual, links to the players whose replays were used will be left in the description. Thank you for watching, have a great night, and take care.